Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture.
Well, hello. How's everybody doing today?
Well, hello.
Once again, doing good. I'm enjoying the warmer weather in Kentucky. We had a early snow in Kentucky, and now it's up very warm again, which is what, par for the course for Kentucky, would you say, in our lovely state?
I do appreciate it because in a way, like as much as it like is kind of irritating from a farming standpoint, because you're like, why are things ruined? It's like Mother Nature saying, no, you know what, you need to be done, and then you need to close up shop, and so it forces you to be done, and then gives you warm weather in order to get it finished.
No. Just flips your switch and then allows you to do it. Yeah,
just because I have the livestock side in my farming, so now it's just like, doing chores in the cold, right? I texted Alexis the other day, and I was like, I don't know, is it my age? What has happened? But I don't think I like winter anymore, because now it's like, where we got to bundle everybody up to go feed at night, and it's so dark. But now it's warm again. So we went from
I
snow
don't like
to warm.
I'm not a fan of the cold. I'm more or less saying like the random cold followed by warmth is like a kind of a gift. Same with like when you have warm days in the middle of winter and you're like, oh, I can actually like do the things I didn't get to do before it got cold.
It's like you're triggered by the cold snaps because, I've got to do this, this, and this, which is very appropriate for the topic that we will get to eventually today. But it flips that switch in my mind that, hey, it is winter, even though we're probably going to have summer temperatures at some point in winter, because it's Kentucky. But yet it gets me in the mode to actually go and I've got to cut down banana trees, banana plants that are beside the house.
Do all the chores.
Do all the winterizing things that I know I need to do, even though today it's going to be 70. It's wintertime and it's 70. So it's a confusing times.
I have more bulbs to plant. So I am excited for now the warmer temperatures again.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, I like that. So and now it's
you're
a good time.
You're like, I gotta cram it all into these like 3 warm days we have.
In between feeding the cattle in the mud. Yes. Got to do all the things.
Well, I always bring up like something food related, and I just wanted to share. I wanted to share before, even though this is off topic, we were like flowing right into our topic for the day. But I feel like this is important enough that all of you will want to know.
It's food. It is important. We need that.
Well, I saw a video recently of somebody who they they're making hot chocolate, but instead of using just like you all are probably milk users, which is, totally valid. But instead of using milk or water, using tea, like your pre-made like herbal teas, like your peppermint tea for your hot chocolate, or your Earl Grey tea, or your chai tea, or something like that. And then you put your hot chocolate mix into your like tea, and then it's flavored like that. And I just thought that was cool. So I did it with my coffee.
That sounds very English. Yeah.
If you're a big peppermint mocha fan, if you're, because it makes it like hot chocolate, right? Because hot chocolate powder you can mix with water, right? Just like normal, but instead you're flavoring your water, so then your hot chocolate is flavored. And I was like, this is genius, and I just needed everybody to know about it as we enter like tea season.
I have 2 questions, or one. Well, one. First, I was so glad that you didn't say that you were going to make hot chocolate with bone broth, because that was a thing last year. Yes. Did you not know that was a thing?
No, that's fresh news to me.
It was. Even some of the FCS agents, the Family Consumer Science agents in our area, said they had tried it. And guess what? They said it was not good. Can you imagine?
Shocker.
Right? So
nothing
I'm glad you didn't
screams
do
comfort
that.
food like bone broth. I mean,
but so you did it, right? You tried it. How was it?
You tried it? Yeah, like if you like peppermint tea. But I did. I wasn't ready for hot chocolate at the moment, and I'm a big chai tea latte fan. It's like with a shot of espresso in it. So what I did instead was I put a chai tea bag in my I do pour over coffee, so in like my decanter, and then I made my coffee, and so the coffee then like made the chai tea bag, and then I had like a chai coffee in the morning, and it was like very little to no work. I'm telling you,
it's
man.
kind of is like, I like milk and tea anyway. So that's just like you're taking that one step farther than just milk. You're doing
just like
milk plus.
easy.
Yeah.
Listen,
The peppermint
we're
seems
going
like that
into
would
cold
work for me.
season, or it's around Thanksgiving. Everybody's going to be getting cozy.
You're making your own
thought
like
you
weird
all
medicine
needed
ball tea. Yeah, you're making your
that
own
little. Oh, I
something.
do love a medicine ball tea. Like
That's my
citrus,
favorite.
honey,
Yeah,
like
that's my
minty.
favorite. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways,
Good
but
stuff.
we should talk about things that you might be doing that deserve a delicious cup of tea or hot cocoa, which is the whole tuber situation, the whole underground plant part. What do I do with it? It's cold now. Situation that we all get lots of questions about. I had one yesterday. You all have probably had one, and they're like, what do I do with these? And so specifically, we talk about things like, dahlias is the big one. That's like kind of the big one everybody knows about, but there's some other stuff as well.
Yeah, there's definitely some other ones that are out there.
As Alexis is recovering from illness.
Caladiums. We get lots of questions about them. The dahlia one, though, is the biggest one that I always get. Because
and they're a little tricky. There's some commonalities with everything, but even when I first started messing with those years ago, I did them wrong. I'm not afraid to say that. I wasn't paying attention and I did them wrong. And I know Alexis has lots of great information on that. But a lot of the things we'll mention today on all the tender things we need to lift or dig in the fall, like there's some commonalities, some common things among most of them or all of them, but there's some that have some nuances, and dahlia is a great example of that. In that the way you treat those, I guess, Alexis.
So I think the biggest thing to point out, and it's like very obvious, but sometimes it's like to start to make sure your brain is wrapped around with, what are your goals for when you're storing these tubers? You don't want them to rot and you don't want them to dry out. Okay. So like usually it's one extreme or the other. And I have lost, bulbs and corms and tubers and all that kind of stuff to both of those before. And because I guess, and the other thing is, there is no correct answer for every person every year. So I've done a lot of different type of storage situations. If you move houses, if you put a dehumidifier in your place, it's going to change the way you store something. And so what works one year is not always going to work the next year. And keeping in mind that there's those two ends of the spectrum. You don't want them to rot and you don't want them to dry out. And I think making sure you have that in your brain ahead of time makes all of the storage stuff, like, to go through a little bit more, like, make more sense, that those are your two goals, and it's relatively easy to combat both of them. And the next thing that you have to keep in mind is temperature. So there are some outliers we'll talk about that really want, super warm temperatures or even super cold temperatures, but majority of the stuff that you're going to lift and dig are all going to be within that like 40 to 50 degree Fahrenheit range for storage over winter. So basically you don't want them to freeze. And, if it's a little bit in either direction, you're probably going to be fine. But, to make sure you're fine, between 40 and 50 is usually the goal. I've had, dahlia crates get down to 38 before and had no problems. There was a little insulation in there, so I think that's what helped. But really, you just don't want them to freeze in that water and stuff. So your goal is always 40 to 50. And then as far as storage goes, there is about a billion different ways to do it. Again, it just depends. Are you in a dry environment and therefore you need to make sure your tubers aren't going to dry out? So you need to take steps to keep them moist. Or are you in a warm or a more moist environment and you need to make sure they don't rot? And so you want to take steps to make them feel a little bit more dry throughout the winter. So that's what ultimately you have to decide. Like, what is going to determine how you store your tubers is, are you in a dry environment or are you in a more moist environment?
And I don't think there's any substitute for looking at them every now and again. Actually, like once a month or something, because you have 3 or 4 months.
That's what I do for mine.
One of these things, and you have to go through, and it's kind of like potatoes. If that one rots, then it kind of spreads. So actually, just because even the best curing phase, which is a phase before storage, even the best process, you're still going to have some of those that especially the really fleshy ones that start to kind of collapse and get mushy, and that's going to spread. So you've got to inspect those.
And
you
it's going to
mentioned
be
that curing stage, right? So like I am a novice to this because the previous house that I lived in, I did not have a space that I could do this at, like what you've already like described, right? I didn't have a good location versus now I have a cellar, so I can do things. But you're talking about the curing process, right? And I know like with sweet potatoes, I know about how, we go about curing those and leaving them, outside on a well ventilated area, and you have like the warmer temperatures. What about with these guys? Because if you're pulling them now, what is like that curing process? Because I guess that's the first process, right? After you pull them is to cure first, or is like you don't like,
and
you know,
you don't need to overthink it in the same way of like potatoes. So a lot of the time the curing will happen. So after the plant, so I'm going to use dahlias as an example, because again, they're kind of one of the more difficult ones. And if you can nail that one, you can nail most of the other ones.
Any of them, yeah.
So, dahlias, the easiest way to cure them, similar to sweet potatoes and potatoes, is you just let the above ground parts die back. And then, and usually that happens and you're not ready to dig them yet anyways, because you got a billion other things going on. But as long as the ground doesn't freeze, then those can stay in the ground until you're ready for them. And so part of that, just leaving them in the ground until you get around to them, will help them cure, which is what we also do with,
and that's
potatoes,
advantageous. Does that accumulate energy, Alexis? I've heard that before, that process is natural, and that's what the plant needs anyways. And just because the tops died, you don't immediately run out there and you don't have to dig them the very same day or the day after.
Yeah. And there is a misconception that you have to wait until the above ground parts die, and that is not true. But if you dig them early, which I have done before, because if you got time, the frost is coming and, you're just wanting to get it out of the way while it's still warm and dry, you might go ahead and dig them, and that's fine. You can totally do that. You can cut them back and dig them the same day, but you're going to have to do some of that curing. And usually that just means letting them kind of dry out somewhere for a little while before you pack them up. Just a few days really is what you're looking for. It's not quite the, rocket science that I think.
Do you normally do a couple weeks, Alexis? Couple weeks, 7 to 14 days?
No, even just a few days with good ventilation. Like if you throw them in some crates that have, holes all the way around, or, set them out on a table or something, a few days with some, a light fan running usually will be enough. The other thing I tell people, if they are not experts in storing tubers, is to leave the dirt on them. And so you can knock off the big clod so they're not super heavy and they're not taking up as much space. So, whatever you can get off relatively easy with your hands is great. But that layer of, dirt that's on the tuber is actually going to help you, right? It's going to hold in some moisture. It's going to also prevent some bacteria from getting in there, from the outside. And, it will contain rot even a little bit, like just that light layer of dirt. And so I would say if you've never done storage before, whether it's, gladiolus or whatever, don't wash them, because you also are, you're wetting down the surface again. You can have, other bacteria and stuff because those tubers are wet. So it's just it's easier, right? Like nobody wants to be, as someone who's done it, cleaning off tubers in the, wet mud everywhere, spraying them off, and it's cold outside. It's like the most miserable job you can do in the plant world, is cleaning stuff when it's cold.
Yeah, it seems like I'm team no wash for all of that stuff. And once they go through like a curing phase of, however, a week or two, whatever your process is. And, I don't even do a lot brush anymore. I just kind of knock off the excess. But I mean, that's not on a commercial scale. That's just me personally. But if you're a home gardener, I think it's much better, not to wash those.
Much
and if
easier
at
process.
the most, and if you're giving them as gifts, which, that they make a great gift, you may, take a light brush or something and to get a little bit more of that excess off if you're going to package those up for a gift. But yeah, that's a really good
And you'll
point.
see a lot of people, large growers will start dividing. So as soon as they dig, they're going to divide. And so they will wash when they divide because, you've got to be able to get in there and see the eyes and see where you're going to do division at. But they are typically more commercial style growers, and they have a very specific area that they know and it's dialed into their storage, and they have to start dividing early in order to be able to get everything done to sell them to people in the springtime. So it's how they get their counts and stuff. So you will see that. It's not wrong. If you have a really great space for storage and you want to do it when you dig, there's nothing wrong with it. I would just say, like, in my experience, you can get away with a lot more if you don't wash and divide them early. Now, that being said, they take up a lot of space when they're in clump form, which is not always great when you're digging, hundreds and thousands of them. So again, that's another reason people divide. I always tell people, if you don't have space, divide it in half, see if you have more space then, because some of that stuff falls off and you can arrange them a little bit easier. And if that doesn't work, divide them again, but you want to divide it as minimally as possible to make it fit. And so you might, cut a clump in half or in thirds or something like that, but as minimal as you can for easiest storage would be my recommendation.
We were just talking about for homeowners. One of the benefits of waiting maybe until later in the spring is if you have a new variety or having trouble identifying what's a viable eye, which is really hard to tell once you dig them, even after curing, it's very hard to tell. Point.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna. Is this the right time to start talking about that? Because that's like the big question, right? When it comes to dividing them, and you were kind of mentioning about, if it's not done properly, you're just destroying your plant. You're not, you're cutting it up in all the wrong spots, and you're not going to get any flowers from it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, most people are familiar with potato eyes, right? You can see that little indentation. And as long as there's a little indentation on every single piece, you can get growth coming out of that, right? Most people are familiar. So it's similar, pretty much the same, but a lot more difficult to see on dahlias and some other types of tuberous roots and things. And so if you divide them when they are warm, and so that is either on the front end, like as soon as they're dug, they're still usually like kind of those eyes are active and really visible. Or what I like to do, because I don't want to divide in the fall, is in the springtime, I will pull them out of storage. And by spring, I mean usually it's like late winter when I'm like itching to do something, and I have time, and while I still have time, and so I will actually pull those crates that I use out of storage and put them in a warmer area. So I'm going to try and get them between 50 and 60 degrees, and that signals them to wake up. And so they start to wake up just enough that those eyes will swell and they're easier to see. And then I will divide them and in either, depending on what time of year it is, leave them in that semi-warm stuff. They'll start to wake up. It's not really a big deal if they start kind of growing a little bit. You'll pull them out and they'll have little sprouts on them, and that's totally fine. Or I can even throw them back into storage, at that 40 to 50 degree level, and then they're ready to go and pull out. But usually the way the timing works for me is I pull them out, I let them warm up for a couple weeks. I get those eyes active. I divide them, wash them if I need to, and then just leave them, in a warmish space. And by that time, there's no real chance of freezing outside. And then they're ready to go in the ground when the soil warms up.
And dahlias are a good one to talk about because I do think, Alexis, it's one of the tougher ones. Like I said, I've made mistakes with those. When I was in college, we were dividing a bunch at the college farm, and I just saved the expanded root structure, not knowing that the important part of the eye is really close to the stem. So if you haven't, and it's hard to explain, but it's easy to see in a video. There's several good extension service videos online. I'd encourage you guys, if you've never done it, to go and watch it. Once you see it, you're like, oh, that's what I'm looking for, because the important part is actually very close to the stem. And even some varieties I've seen eyes up on the stem.
Up on the stem.
At the base of the stem. So the big impressive structure is just a storage structure. If you just cut that off, you've not done the right thing. You've actually lost the plant. You've lost the growing point. So that's why
you've lost the crown.
Dahlias. That's what I think makes dahlias so tricky. And it's like completely different if we talk about something like a gladiola. Do you do any glads, Alexis?
I do, but I don't lift mine. I think mine are
Some
just
people do and
mulched
some people
enough.
don't. Yeah, and
That
some seem to do well over the winter, but they're
that got me
different when you dig those.
thinking about, like, cannas and stuff as well.
Yeah,
I know some
Mhm.
people who,
which
like,
can
leave
just
them
be
out all
monsters.
year
Yeah.
and others that dig them up,
And when you
right?
Mhm.
dig them up, my goodness, on cannas specifically, I've dug up 20-pound masses on a planting that has only been there for a year. They are so prolific. It is
Vigorous. Yeah.
absolutely amazing on the cannas.
I
But what are
Cannas
the
are a good
yeah,
one, yeah.
I have
yeah,
a
that's a good
question
one.
for you, Alexis. So if you're like a homeowner and you're digging up a dahlia, right?
Mhm,
Do you
mhm.
need to divide it? Or like is that gonna help the plant? Or like if you're just like, I just really want to save this dahlia and you dig it up and you just store that whole, structure and then can you
Mhm.
just replant that back in the spring and be
Yeah,
good
yeah,
to
you can
go?
totally plan it back as is, and it'll be really prolific the next year because, in theory, you could have divided it into, 3, 4, maybe more plants. And so if you're keeping that all as one, you're going to have a really bushy plant, which is totally fine. It just means you have to dig a bigger hole and, then you don't have as many, different plants because obviously if you divided that into 5 plants, you're going to get more stems than one plant that is really 5, if that makes sense. And so you'll still get plenty, but mostly I just don't like to dig big holes. So
Yeah.
which is unlike the tree episode that that
That
we have
we were
Right.
recorded
talking
That
about
we
about
doing
just
these
talked
digging.
massive
about.
holes, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't skimp on the hole size, yeah.
If you haven't heard
Yeah.
that yet, it's either coming out next week or it just came out the week before. So but yeah, so if you don't want to dig big holes or just want more of something or want to gift them like Ray was saying, then divide them. But now if you're worried about it, you don't have to. I would say you will be surprised at your capabilities if you let that warm up. You'll see those sprouts starting to come out, and then you'll know exactly where to cut it in half or thirds or whatever. And if you're not sure, just cut it in half and you are pretty much guaranteed to have eyes on both sides, right? Like literally cut the stem in half. And if you lose a few little of those storage roots, is really what they are. They're tuberous roots. If you lose some of those, it's not a big deal. You really just want that crown with the eyes on them.
Yeah, I get that question a lot, Alexis. People are very concerned about trimming off those smaller tip roots.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
it's one of those things that I've never found
I
it to be
chop
a
them.
big deal. Yeah, I just trim them off at the
Anything
time.
that's
And
like Anything that's not like at least the size of like a nickel around, I cut it
yeah,
off before I even throw it in storage because it's
yeah.
not gonna make it. It's gonna shrivel up or it's gonna rot. And so I just eliminate the chances of it and cut that right off. The next biggest thing I think was storage of tubers of any kind, tuberous roots, whatever, is what do you store them in? And so
I was just
you
going to
have the
ask that.
area. Yeah, you have the area that's 40 to 50 degrees. And then what do you do with them? Well, again, depends on the moisture content, but I think that one of the easier things that is most universally works for most people is some sort of plastic tote, plastic crate. I like to get the cheap ones after Christmas that are like red and green and on sale because they're red and green. um, I get those, and so something that would essentially hold water, which helps with the maintaining moisture, and then some sort of media, so either vermiculite, which is that shiny stuff that you see in potting soil. If you're not familiar, you can buy just really big bags of that. That stuff's nice because it's really light. It is a little bit pricier. It's not, crazy. And for some people, like for homeowners, it could be a little bit harder to get a hold of. The other thing is that I like to use because it's cheaper and it's easier for me to find is pet bedding, like pine shavings for like
Yeah,
rabbits or something
wood
like that. It can
shavings.
be pine, it can be
Mhm.
cedar, it doesn't matter. But the like flakes is what I like because I can just buy it. I can also then use it as I will once I plant my tubers. I don't like to use that from year to year because I never know what could have rotted or gotten weird in there. And I will actually use those shavings as like mulch on top of my dahlias. And so it doesn't like go super far, but it's a useful thing to have. And it breaks down pretty well because it's a shaving.
Do you ever
So I
use
like to
pure
use
peat?
that.
Pure peat. Do you ever use that? Peat
I have
moss?
used peat. Yeah, I have used peat before in my environment that holds a little too much moisture. So I get more rot on mine.
Yeah.
But I think that I'd rather my tubers be on the drier side, because even if they're pretty shriveled, you'll be surprised at how much they'll bounce back versus you're less likely to bounce back from rot. And so like I'd rather them be, but if you're in an area where you're in a really dry garage or something like that, or you have them in a space with a dehumidifier running all the time, then something like peat would be great because it's got a little bit more moisture holding capacity.
Yeah, so I know material makes it. I've even seen folks use like cross-cut shredded office paper for some of these things. But especially if they use like a ventilated onion bag or they use a cardboard box, because containers also help manage moisture. And if you want to keep it a little drier, you could always go with cardboard over plastic.
That's true.
But I've seen everything in the world uses media, and I've seen people like what we were talking about tuberous begonias a little bit. People that would just bring those pots in, and if they have a really dry garage, and they'll just leave them in there and just let them dry down after a frost kills the top portion. That's all they do year after year. I'm like, how do people do that? But I've seen people successfully, if they have a well-drained potting media for certain ones of these, tender bulbs and corms and things we're talking about, that you can get by with that on some of those with very little prep.
Yeah.
If you're not going to do a
Amaryllis,
lot of division.
Yeah, I know amaryllis it's like the opposite timeline than what we're talking about now, but like this, it's still the same idea, right? Like, and so like I leave mine in the pot, in the whatever, and I just put it in a space. It doesn't get water. I let it dry down. It's dark, and then I just bring it back out and start watering it again. And it
just takes off.
Right, and it just takes off. And so every once in a while you have to refresh that media if you're using the same pot from year to year. You'll have to do that, but in general, just leave it in the potting soil, because that potting soil's got a lot of the things we talk about. Like you could also use perlite. If you have a really wet area, you could use perlite as a media to store in. And the flip side, I've seen people who are in super dry, arid conditions, in New Mexico and places like that, where their problem is they don't have enough humidity, and they will saran wrap their tubers. Like they'll divide them and saran wrap them, or they'll put them in like plastic bags or something like that. And so, it can go all the way in the other direction. In Kentucky, we don't have a humidity problem, that's for sure. But if you're, and it goes back to like checking them. So I check them once a month, and I just put a little reminder in my calendar, and it pops up, and says like, hey, check your tubers. And so I'll go out there and kind of like dig through and look towards make sure you check the bottom of the crate, because that's where the rot will happen. So check the bottom of your crate or your tote or your box, and for any rot, just kind of I usually just kind of feel around. And if I feel something gross, then that's a problem.
Nothing's
so
worse
with
than
gloves.
That's like finding a rotten potato. I mean, you find that by sticking your hand in there. First, you probably smelled some of these things first.
Yeah,
not always, but then you put your hand in
potatoes in my house one time, and
I lost my mind over potatoes.
Yeah, you'll find a potato,
and you'll find a lot of little critters wiggling around in your cabinets when you find them. It's like. Luckily, I've never had that happen with dahlias, even when they rot, because they're, contained, that I've never had like a maggot problem. It's just a gooey, gross thing. They don't usually smell too bad either. So that's good. But yeah, feel around in there. If you do like feel tubers, if you look and you're like, oh, these are really, really shriveled and it's only been a month. What I will do is I'll take like, I don't know, couple cups of water, and I'll pour it over that bedding that I'm using, over the top, and just kind of not directly on the tubers, but in the like media itself. And usually that will soak its way into the rest of the media and be enough to get through. But yeah, even if you pull them out and they're completely shriveled up, don't discount them. I was cleaning out my barn yesterday and like trying to get my crates and getting all my totes and stuff ready. And I pulled out a tote, and I mean, these went into storage in winter or like fall 2024. And I was like dumping it out, and I found clumps in there, dahlia clumps in there that still had sprouted, and they had been in a tote in the barn, just out in the open since fall 2024, and they were still sprouted. So
nature will
it will
find a
shock
way.
you.
Plants
want
to live.
Despite our best efforts to mess things up. Do you, on any of these that we're talking about today, dahlias, glads, or elephant ears, which we've not talked about, that's one of those that some people just leave in the ground. But on any of these, do you guys, have you worked with people on like pre-sprouting these? Because some of these things, it seems like I've heard of people like you want to get a jump start in the spring. You can bring them out, leave them in the house 4 weeks before the last hard frost, which sometimes is in May. Sometimes that's up into May in Kentucky. But to start some of these things early, you can just bring them out into a warm environment, and that'll kind of wake them up. Do you guys ever mess around with anything like that to kind of get them pre-going before the first frost, before they go into the landscape
that's
bed?
what I do when I'm like when I divide them, and I'll tend to just like leave them out to wake up, and so they'll already be sprouted and ready to go in the ground, and then I know that they're like actively growing when I get them in the ground. But with dahlias, a lot of people will do cuttings. If you've got the space, you can wake them up really early, and then start taking cuttings if you want to like maximize your supply of something. There's other things that, exactly what you said, right? Like just bring them into a warm environment, start giving them some light, and they'll, be ready to plant out by the 1st of May. I will be doing that with one thing we've not talked about that not a lot of people grow, but it's exciting, is I grew tulip gingers for the first time this year. Curcuma.
I forgot about those.
And they're super
really cool.
They look, the storage on that, like they are roots similar to dahlias, like a tuberous root type situation, and they can be divided. They look very similar. But they need to be stored a little bit warmer. So they're more on the 50 to 60, because remember, these are jungle plants, where dahlias are actually native to, the mountains in Mexico.
Like the caladiums we were talking about. Certain ones are warmer. Yeah.
Certain ones are warmer. So definitely do your research if it's something new. So these ones will be stored a little bit warmer than I do my dahlias, which of course is annoying because I have to find another place for them. But they are very long season and they like it hot. So I'm going to bring those out and like pot them up early, because I want to get a longer season out of them, because it takes them a while to get going. And so I'll bring them out and like actively try and get them like really going, so that I can put them in by May. But yeah, that's totally doable. And it's exciting, when you're like just ready for spring and you're like, oh, I just want to do something. And, you can bring out some plants and get them going, and you'll get, a month jump start on blooms a lot of the time for this stuff.
We've talked about all the nuances of this stuff and all the similarities, commonalities between the process, but I want to know what your guys' tool sets are. I mean, and it made me think about it, Jessica, when you said canna lilies, which can be these huge just big masses. I mean, I want to see what your tool sets are. Paint us a picture for like what's your essential tools for when you're tackling, all the divisions of all these root structures. I've seen people use everything in the world, depending on kind of what they're working with, from an axe down to fine needle tip snips. I mean, I've seen everything. So what's essential here when you're dividing based on what you're working with? I mean,
well, I would say one of your essential things for digging is a pitchfork, or like a carrot fork or something
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like a carrot fork. Yeah. So something with like tines to help you get underneath there. Now if you've got something like, I don't know, a peony that you're digging up, or cannas, you're probably going to need just a regular shovel for that. But for anything that's like more of an annual, once a year type thing, usually some sort of tined thing will help.
Yeah.
And then you're not cutting off a bunch of tubers. So that's mine. Jessica, do you have any favorites?
Well, now that you said that, we moved peonies the other day at our house, where I wanted to move somewhere. They're in a location that they come up every year and they don't bloom, and it's because they're like in full shade.
Yeah.
So just a shovel is all that needed.
Yeah,
and you can see the little, probably say the wrong, the eye or whatever, the little buds already on them, but at this time of year, dividing them up. But a shovel or the pitchfork, like you said, I've used that a lot, more with more vegetable production background, but with lifting things, that is very handy.
Yeah, I've broken the handle out of some of those guys, those flat forks, because I get really aggressive. And depending on what you're digging, I mean, it could be something that some of these things are only an inch below the surface, like a caladium, or if you're digging like an elephant ear, my goodness, it takes some effort. It takes some effort to get some of those things out of the ground. Yeah.
I've broken a shovel handle or two.
Yeah, taking out that aggression. I've seen people use and one of my favorite things, and I believe it was cannas that got me into this. I don't do a lot with ornamental grasses anymore, but like an old bow saw for some of these things. We talk about being delicate and drying down, but if it's one of these huge masses, I give up and go for the heavy equipment. One of my favorite things is this old bow saw I keep for that purpose in the garage. It's dull, and I just hack straight, like you said, Alexis. I'm chunking them down into manageable bits, and I will deal with the particulars later, but I will just straight saw through the center of some of these things like a bludgeon. That is my style.
I've people who are not like huge plant people, like, have never done something like this before. When they see plant people, like, people like us,
they're like, what are you
go after
doing?
something like, I dug up a big old peony and was moving it to my house, and someone was watching me. It was their peony, and so I dig out this big thing, and I've got one of those big long shovels,
lots of leverage.
I just started like hacking at the crown, like you said, to divide it and
going at it,
into a couple pieces, and I'm just like destroying this thing, and they are appalled. They're like, what is going on? I'm like, it's fine. I can cut this thing into like 10 pieces. It's fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
It's called tough love. It's tough love. But I mean, it can be a delicate operation, like we were talking about in the beginning, or some of these larger clumps, you really have to use more of a coarse tool rather than a fine tool, and a little bit of extra effort.
Once I get dahlias out of the ground, when I do end up dividing them in, for me, late winter, so I will cut back the stem with a pair of loppers, or I'll flail mow them down, or whatever it is, mow them down somehow. But then when I'm actually dividing the tubers, I use needle nose snips, which is what I use for cutting flowers anyways. It's just kind of a finer snip. I know some people who are doing, the big commercial operations, who are doing literally like millions of tubers. They'll use like box knives or like an X-Acto knife, like a scalpel.
Oh, wow.
And part of that is because it's, number one, you can change the blade really easy, because when you're doing, millions, your blade is going to dull.
And you're cutting
but
through,
also they can be a little bit more exact. So when they are taking a tuber, they're wanting to get every single root with an eye, where I'm like, I just need majority of them to survive, right? And I don't need to be as exact. And so they can do that with something like a scalpel, and it's easy to disinfect. So they'll do that in between clumps to make sure they're not spreading any virus or bacteria.
Commercially it's a lot different in it. And I've seen the commercial operations use fungicidal dips or sulfur dips or whatever, and I don't recommend that a lot for homeowners, but that is an interesting point on sterilizing with like a 1 to a 10%
10% bleach solution. 1 cup bleach, 10 cups water, and you can just have that there to like dip your I would say you dip whatever you want in there, like your snips or whatever. But if you do your snips or something like that, make sure you grease them and clean them up afterwards, because bleach will corrode.
Very corrosive.
So.
There's a lot of difference.
And I would say, like, unless you've noticed a problem, or you're getting in clumps from someone else and you don't know what could possibly be on them, then you probably don't need to do that. But if you've maybe noticed some issues with your dahlias or your cannas or whatever, dipping them in something between each clump would be really wise.
Yeah, it's amazing how some people report some of these that we're talking about, just whether it's an elephant ear or a canna or a gladiolus or whatever. It's really amazing to be, depending on what their location is, how much it varies based on the success. Some people have never transplanted any of those things. They'll mulch heavy and just leave them there. Other people's like, I lose them half of the time. Do you guys ever run into that, where it kind of just varies a lot?
Just the right place, like the luck of it. I went on a home visit before, where a guy had this massive canna that was beautiful, and he said he'd been trying everything he possibly could to kill it, and it just kept coming back. And I was like, what? People would love to have this, He didn't realize how they they grew, right? Until he explained, I was like, well, you technically might want to like dig it up, right? Because he just kept cutting it back and everything, and
Got a lot of energy
it
in
just
there.
kept coming. But it was like out in the middle of a yard. Right? It wasn't even in
Wow.
like a protected area, and it was thriving versus I know other people who have them and they religiously dig them up every single year because one year they didn't dig them all, up and something happened and they only had a few survive. So they will like clockwork. Okay, it's time to dig and move these into my basement or my garage. So
usually I feel like that about my
find
banana plant.
Yeah. Yeah, your banana, you've got some
and now
hefty
I'm like
banana
trying
plants.
to kill them, constantly trying to kill them because they will not die. And I'm like, you were supposed to die in the winter. They don't die because they're close to the house in a little micro. That's what it is.
Yeah.
They're doing too well, and I'm sick of them.
Usually with stuff like that, I have found, because I've overwintered like my like large dahlia thing, and usually it's moisture, and so they rot, and it's the cold and the rot, right? Like if they can take a lot of water if it's warm, but they can handle cold if they stay relatively dry. And so if you're wanting to do some experimenting, I would say do a heavy mulch on some of your stuff, and then if you want that extra layer of protection, like you actually care if it lives or dies, something that keeps out the water. So like we use silage tarps here, which are, not permeable. They're not a woven. They're just a big piece of plastic. A lot of people I've seen use like old billboards too that are like, weather resistant, but anything like that. And then you put that over top of your mulched area, and that's going to keep the water out. And so they can get cold, but they can't get cold and wet is usually what I have found. And so, you can give that a shot if you want to.
Yeah.
You don't get
There's
to divide
variations
them and
in
get
everything.
lots and lots of stuff, but it does have its perks of, I don't know, not being disgusting and dirty and storing them and all the, I hate it.
Yeah, most of these things, like I said, they don't all store the same. Most of them do. 40, 50 degrees is fine. There are some exceptions we've talked about today, but just finding space for all the little projects. And I don't have commercial space. I've just got a garage. It's really good, 40 to 50 degrees in the winter, an attached garage. But, it's like we got to have space for the other things that a garage is for typically, rather than a bunch of stuff sitting around, plant materials. So yeah,
I am so jealous of I'm so jealous of people who have like unfinished basements or like crawl spaces that are easy to get into.
That are just perfect.
That is like premium space for stuff like this.
The humidity, if it's in good shape, it's perfect. Yeah.
You basically don't have to try, and like
Jessica,
they'll
don't you have a
store
root
perfectly
cellar?
well.
Don't you have one of those setups?
I do. That's what I was saying at the beginning. I was like, in the past, I did not have a garage or a cellar or a basement where I used to live. And so I would basically just be like, oh, dahlias, they're annuals in my house, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no saving these ever because where am I going to put them? But now I have a cellar. So now, like as we've been talking and you've been sharing, I was just like thinking of all the things that I can do and add in my own yard and put now down in that cellar.
I am so jealous. I wish we had a cellar.
Just had like peach crates just full of all the things, Jessica. Yeah, just slatted crates just stacked everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Store all my vegetables in there, all that kind of stuff. But
all the goodies. All the goodies.
Your root cellar or whatever. But anyways, we hope that helped. Usually it's hard because the answer is not the same for everybody, and it's like, well, it's the classic. You're like, oh, can I do this? And you're like, well, it depends, which is what every plant person hates to hear is it depends.
I want the exact answer now.
Yeah, there is no one shoe fits all for storage options. Just if you check on them and you notice they're starting to rot, then you need to get them drier, and vice versa. And as long as you can keep them above freezing, but below that growing air, thing, which is for most stuff 50, 55 degrees. Lower than that is great. Then you will be successful, and then you'll have all these plants, and then every year you'll go, oh, I have more. Where am I going to put them? And then you'll be digging more, and then you have created a monster, and you're
giving
welcome.
away more, and maybe start a plant swap or go to a help
there
group,
you go.
whichever.
I like that. I like that, right? You're like, you know what? Just share the love. That's all. That's all there is to
We're
it.
going to try to start that. We have a lot of great local gardeners in Bourbon County, as I'm sure in your all's counties and across the state. But I love a good plant swap, and what we're talking about today is just goes along so well, with preparing things and storing things, and in the springtime, just trading things. But there's a lot of different ways to accomplish those community plant swaps, and we're going to do one in the spring, and I'm pretty excited about it. We're going to lay down some ground rules to keep things kind of structured, but it's all the things that we just talked about today that makes things like that possible. And people that have success with that 20-pound root ball or that root mass of canna lilies, and it's like, what do I do with it? It's like, well, go and trade it for something you want more, trade it for that dahlia or whatever. Yeah. So good
That's
stuff.
awesome. Yeah. I always forget about those. I just feel like I have to grow them. Like, I'm like, well, they're here, so I got to put them in the ground.
Hey, I got to do something. Yeah. Eventually, Alexis, you will run out of outdoor space as well as indoor space. Eventually.
I bought 14 acres. It'll be fine.
Okay.
It'll be
And
fine.
that's a lot of plants. That's at least 3 more years before you crash out.
Jessica's laughing because she was here when dahlia season was at like its ultimate low. And she was like, you're just doing too much, Alexis. And I was like, how dare you?
Don't judge me. Yeah. All
right, awesome. Well, we appreciate you guys being here today. Hopefully you picked up some tips and going into storage season. And if you've already started that, maybe you need to change a few things. Or if you've already stored a bunch of your stuff, have you checked on it lately? Why don't you go do that? That's a little tip for you. You can find our email if you've got any questions about storing stuff or any plant questions at all. Please feel free to shoot us an email and we will get back to you on that. You can follow us on Instagram at Hort Culture Podcast. And we are just so glad that you join us every week. So thank you for being here, and we'll check on you next time. Have a great one.